right, ready to dive into something interesting.
Always.
Let's do it. Today we're looking at
Looking at scaling
scaling. Exactly.
businesses
Yeah, scaling businesses and how to do it without,
without messing it up.
yeah, without hitting those common pitfalls.
The downfalls.
The downfalls, yeah.
Yeah.
And we've got a really interesting article here from Coreyzat Technologies.
Those guys are great.
Yeah, they always have their finger on the pulse of what's happening, especially when it comes to, tech and business.
They do.
And this one is Growth and Scaling Downfalls Part 4. So
Part 4, they've learned a few things.
clearly they've learned a thing or two.
Yes.
If we're on Part 4.
Yeah, this is a deep dive for them, and I think we're going to
yeah.
get some good stuff out of it.
I think we are too. And one of the things that they emphasize right off the bat is this idea of an experimentation mindset.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't just mean like, A/B testing a landing page or something.
Yeah, this is a little more all-encompassing.
It's like, how do you define that? Like what?
It's about being willing to try new things constantly.
Okay.
And I think this is the most important part, taking what you learn from each of those experiments and then rapidly adapting and moving forward.
Got it. So it's not just about, okay, let's try something new. It's like, let's try something new. Let's really look at what happened.
Analyze it.
And then, okay, what do we do with that information?
Let's change our behavior.
Exactly.
Our processes, maybe even our strategy a little bit based on that new information.
It's almost like applying the scientific method to your business, in a way.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Instead of getting, stuck in analysis paralysis.
Which we've all been there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Especially I think in a small business where you're wearing so many hats.
Yes.
Sometimes you just got to try something and go with it. And if it doesn't work,
Exactly. Course correct.
figure out why, try again,
Now, the article doesn't completely throw data out the window.
No, it's still important.
Quantitative analysis is still
Very important.
very important. Especially, I would think, for those like big decisions.
Absolutely.
But it's almost like,
You can't get stuck in it.
right.
And, I've definitely been guilty of that myself, spending way too long
Oh, I can imagine.
in spreadsheets, agonizing over every little data point, when sometimes you just need to make a call.
Trust your gut a little bit.
Exactly. And that's actually where the article really got me thinking, because it goes on to talk about the importance of what they call qualitative analysis.
Qualitative analysis. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
It's one of those things that's hard to define, but you know it when you see it.
I feel like sometimes people use that phrase,
Yeah.
and it just means like a feeling.
Yeah, gut feeling, right?
Like, I have a good feeling about this.
It's a little more than that, though. I think
Okay.
I think it's about recognizing patterns
Okay.
and using your experience, your knowledge of the industry to kind of make sense of things.
So it's informed intuition. It's not just like a
Yes.
shot in the dark.
Yeah, it's not just pulling something out of thin air. It's saying, okay, I've seen this before, or this feels similar to something.
Yeah, like I've been down this road. I might not have the
hard data.
the spreadsheet to prove it.
But I've got a feeling I've seen this movie before,
Okay, I like that.
And I think that's really valuable, especially when you're growing quickly.
Right. Because sometimes you don't have time to
To wait for all the data to come in.
you got to make a call.
And this is where it gets even more interesting, because they start talking about this bottom-up approach to decision-making, which I think kind of flips the script on how a lot of companies, especially larger companies, tend to operate.
Yeah. It's definitely a different way of thinking, for sure. So instead of, the executives in the ivory tower making all the decisions and then kind of
Dictating down.
dictating down to the rest of the company, they're saying, no, actually, sometimes the best insights, the best decisions come from the people who are closest to the action.
The people on the front lines.
The people on the front lines, right?
Yeah, and that's something I've definitely seen in my own work.
Really?
Absolutely. Like those folks who are dealing with the customers every day, they often have the best ideas for how to improve things.
They're seeing it.
They're in the trenches.
Exactly.
They see what's working, what's not working.
And they probably have opinions on how to fix what's not working.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're full of ideas.
And historically, have they always felt empowered to share those?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
That is the question.
And I think in a lot of organizations, the answer is unfortunately no.
Because there's that fear of, oh, if I speak up.
Speaking truth to power.
Yeah, if I say something that
my boss doesn't want to hear.
that my boss doesn't want to hear, or, they think I'm being critical, or
Right.
I don't know. But it's interesting because this article is really challenging us to think about that
Yeah.
and say, okay, what if we did empower those people? What if we did create a culture where
where their voices were heard.
where they felt safe to speak up and share those ideas, even if they're not, you know, perfectly polished and backed up by a 50-page report?
Exactly. Sometimes the best ideas are the ones that come from those informal conversations,
Totally.
just chatting with your team, brainstorming, that's where the magic happens.
Absolutely.
Right.
So how does that actually work? Like in a real company, how do you actually empower those people and say, okay, we want you to make decisions without it being total chaos?
Right, because it's not like you're just handing over the keys to the kingdom and saying everybody do whatever you want.
Right.
There's still structure, there's still a need for, strategy and alignment.
Oh, of course.
But the article makes this really interesting distinction between what they call micro decisions and macro decisions.
Okay, I like where this is going. Micro versus macro.
So micro decisions are those like everyday choices, those little things that come up all the time, especially on the front lines.
Give an example. What would be like a...
So think about a customer service rep who's on the phone with a frustrated customer and they need to make a judgment call about, how to resolve the issue, maybe bend the rules a little bit to keep that customer happy.
Right, so it's about giving them the autonomy to do what's right in the moment.
Exactly. Instead of having to escalate it up the chain of command and wait for approval, which, let's be honest, can take forever sometimes.
Yeah, and by then the customer's probably tweeted about it.
Exactly. You've lost the opportunity.
Right, you've lost the opportunity to
turn that situation around.
Right, or even just a team that's working on a project and they realize they need to adjust their workflow a little bit to be more efficient.
Those little process improvements, right?
Yeah, hey, we've been doing it this way, but it's actually not working. Can we just tweak it this way?
And instead of having to go through all these layers of approval, they can just make that change
Right.
because they're the ones who are closest to it. They know what's going to work best.
Exactly. So it's about trusting their judgment, giving them that autonomy, which I imagine is a huge morale booster too.
Oh, absolutely. Because people want to feel like they're empowered, like their opinions matter.
Like they're contributing
Exactly.
and that their ideas are valued, not just, you're here to do what you're told.
Right. And when you give people that sense of ownership, they're going to be more engaged, more invested in the success of whatever they're working on.
Makes sense. Now, what about those macro decisions you were saying? There's a distinction.
Right. So macro decisions, those are the big ones, the ones that affect the entire company, the overall strategy.
Okay, so what are we going to do this year? Where are we headed?
Exactly. Things like product development, are we going to launch a new product? Are we going to invest in a new market?
Major financial decisions.
Huge investments. Those are all macro decisions. And those decisions, they still typically need to be made by leadership.
Okay, so it's not like you're saying that, the CEO should just let the interns decide whether to acquire another company or not.
Right. There's still a need for that high-level strategic thinking. But here's the key.
I bet there's a but coming.
There is always a but, right? The key is that those macro decisions, even though they're being made by leadership, they can't happen in a vacuum.
They've got to be informed by what's happening on the ground.
Exactly. That feedback loop from the front lines is absolutely crucial.
So it's like a two-way street. It's not just, information flowing down from the top. It's also flowing back up.
Exactly. And that's where those micro decisions become so important because they provide this constant stream of data, of insights that can then inform those bigger, more strategic decisions.
So it's like, the people on the front lines are the ones who are actually seeing how the sausage is made. And they can tell you if there's a problem with the recipe.
I love that analogy. That's perfect.
Right. They're the ones who are dealing with the customers. They're the ones who are actually doing the work. So they have this incredibly valuable perspective that often gets overlooked.
And that's where I think traditional hierarchical organizations really miss out because they're so focused on that top-down approach that they forget that some of the best ideas, the best solutions are going to come from the bottom up.
And that's what this article is really challenging us to rethink. It's saying, okay, we need to find a way to tap into that collective intelligence, that wisdom of the crowd, if you will, and use that to make better decisions at all levels of the organization.
Absolutely. And I think that's especially important in today's world where things are changing so quickly and you need to be able to adapt and respond to new challenges all the time.
It's like the old ways of doing things, they don't always work in this new environment.
They just don't cut it anymore.
You need to be more agile, you need to be more responsive, and that's where this bottom-up approach, combined with that data-driven decision-making, can really give you a competitive advantage.
Absolutely. And the article actually gives some really interesting examples of companies that are doing this well. Like they talk about this one company that implemented a monthly gut check meeting.
gut check meeting. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more about this.
So basically, once a month, they bring together representatives from all different levels of the organization, from the front lines all the way up to senior management.
Okay, so it's like a cross-functional group.
Exactly. And they have this open forum where everyone is encouraged to share their observations, their insights, their gut feelings about what's working, what's not working, what they're seeing in the market, what they're hearing from customers.
Interesting. And this information goes directly to the top.
Directly to the top, no filters, no BS, just straight talk from the people who are closest to the action.
That's amazing. I love that idea because it creates this direct line of communication between the C-suite and the front lines.
Exactly. And it breaks down those silos that often exist in organizations where different departments are operating in their own little bubbles.
Right, and nobody's really talking to each other.
Exactly. And so you end up with all these missed opportunities, these disconnects between what's actually happening and what leadership thinks is happening.
Right, which can lead to some pretty bad decisions.
Exactly. And so this gut check meeting, it's a way to bridge that gap to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that those valuable insights from the front lines are being heard and acted upon.
I love it. It's like they're creating a feedback loop on purpose instead of just hoping that it happens organically, which, let's be honest, it rarely does.
Right, because you have to be intentional about it. You have to create a system, a culture where that kind of open communication is encouraged and rewarded.
And it makes you realize those folks on the front lines, they really do have their fingers on the pulse of everything that's going on.
They're the ones living it every single day.
Exactly. This whole conversation, by the way, it's got me thinking,
Oh, yeah.
what's that? All those times I had this, I don't know, gut feeling about a decision,
Uh-huh.
even if all the data wasn't there to back it up, sometimes you get this sense.
And were you right?
You know what? More often than not, yeah.
It's amazing how often that happens, isn't it?
It really is. And I wonder how many times we ignore that little voice because we think, oh, I need more data or I need more proof.
Right, got to find that spreadsheet.
When really sometimes it's about tapping into that experience, that intuition that we've built up over time.
It's like our brain is picking up on patterns, making connections that we might not even be consciously aware of.
Exactly. So how do we get better at recognizing that, at trusting ourselves, even when we can't explain it with a bunch of numbers?
That's the million-dollar question. And I don't think there's one easy answer, but I do think it starts with being more aware of those gut feelings when they come up.
Instead of just dismissing them.
Exactly. Write them down, think about them, try to understand where they're coming from.
And maybe even test them out, see what happens.
Exactly. Run some experiments, gather some data, see if your gut feeling was on the right track.
Because it's not an either-or situation, is it? It's not like it's data or intuition. It's about finding that sweet spot where the two work together.
Absolutely. It's about using both sides of your brain, the analytical and the intuitive, to make the best decisions possible.
This has been an amazing deep dive, so many thought-provoking ideas. I'm definitely going to be rethinking how we do things around here.
Me too. I'm already thinking about some changes I can make.
And for everyone listening, we'd love to hear from you. Have you had those gut feeling moments in your own work? How do you balance that with the data-driven approach?
Let's keep this conversation going.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep diving deep.